tuning in to the November 24th Avon Town Council meeting, and let's please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please.
Robert Pope.
Present.
Greg Zuzan.
Present.
Don Loudon.
Present.
Bill Holland.
Present.
Jason Puckett.
Present.
First item on the agenda is the consent agenda. Anybody have any questions regarding the check register or the minutes? Somebody like to make a motion?
I make a motion that we adopt the consent agenda to include our check register for today, our November 7th work session meeting minutes, and our November 7th council meeting minutes as presented.
Second. We have a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Robert Pope.
4.
Greg Zuzan.
4.
Don Loudon.
4.
Bill Holland.
4.
Jason Puckett.
4.
Next item on the agenda is the first of 2 public comment opportunities. The public may comment on items on the agenda that are not a public hearing or on a specific matter within the council's jurisdiction. If you would, come forward, state your name and address, and limit your comments to 3 minutes, please.
Do I have to state my address?
Yes, please.
I am Michelle Logan. Yes, my name is Michelle Logan. I live at 1764 Water Oak Way. I am concerned about the proposed Pulte rezoning on 625. They gave a presentation last night where they were misleading with their comments, or they were not answering questions with honesty. And in my opinion, I don't believe it's appropriate for so many builders to come to Avon and feel so comfortable asking for lowered zoning. Several of the residents were at the event last night, and one lady asked if the neighborhood was, that they were in between the 2 neighborhoods, what it was zoned at, and the Pulte person went on this long diatribe about not knowing, and it was so hard to find the zoning, and it just went on and on and on, trying to distract people who are trying to get answers or questions answered. It took about all of 1 minute to find the zoning for this parcel, so they just didn't want to be truthful with what the zoning was, which is a zone, whatever letter 2, and they want, or no, it's half 1, half, it's R2, or it's half R1. Sorry, I'm a little nervous. I don't give a lot of public speeches. It's half R1, half R2, and they would like to take a lot that is currently all R1 and change it to R2, which does not benefit Avon in any way. It doesn't benefit the neighborhoods that have been over there that pay taxes for R1 in any way. They haven't been honest. And to be honest, I have no idea why builders feel so comfortable coming to Avon and asking for lowered zoning for them. Like, all they want to do is come to Avon, build garbage homes, and make a ton of money and skip town. And I really wish that builders would stop feeling comfortable with this. I would like the proposed zoning not to be lowered to R2 so that some random builder can make $50 million on the backs of a lovely part of town. Who wouldn't want to live amongst a really nice part of town, and you can just buy lowered zoning there. Anywho, I guess that's about it. Hopefully you guys will take into consideration the people who live on 625 and have been paying to live in R1 this entire time and wanted to live in R1 and don't want to have their area turned into R2 because they've been paying for R1 this entire time. And I hope you will send a clear message to builders that Avon is not where you want to come and propose lowered zoning so that you can make a big profit. So that's it. That's all I have to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Is there anybody else that would like to come forward at this time? With nobody else coming forward, then we'll move on to council comment and liaison reports. Jason?
I don't have anything new tonight.
Robert?
School board voted to approve the updated school boundaries at last week's meeting. I'm sure you guys all know about. And they also voted to approve Garmong as our CMC for the new building. And I'm attended the drone show. The drone show was great. And I assume you'll speak to the Hope Landing. That's all I got.
Dawn?
Again, I thought that the drone show was well attended this year. It was nice to see everyone out again, and that's it for me.
Mr. Holland?
The redevelopment commission met. There really wasn't too much going on. They just approved their budget for next year. BZA also met Tuesday night. There was a piece of property over here at 267 and 100 North. And part of it was approved, part of it was turned down. So I think the part that was turned down was the important piece. And I think that the owner is going to have to come back with some different plans.
Let's see, Steve Moore and I met with Locke Mueller, their engineering company here in town, on a couple projects. As Robert indicated, Robert and I attended the Habitat groundbreaking called Hope Landing over there by the Hickory Elementary and Avon Christian Church. Very well received. I attended the Visit Hendricks County. Their new destination defined our path forward, so they talked about that. I did attend the Pulte Homes meeting at Forest Commons on Tuesday night. I want to thank the town and the staff for their Mary Lee Meyer Day of Giving yesterday. I got a nice sweatshirt, but I did nothing to earn it. So, and then Ryan and I also met with Justin Gooden. Justin is a local resident that is a developer, and kind of went over some of the infield thoughts that we had on potential developments. And it's kind of maybe a breath of fresh air. Somebody who's local is going to build something, then, as this lady said, build it and leave. So that's what I did. The other thing I want to say is congratulations to the Avon Marching Gold, Black and Gold, as not only state champions, but grand national champions. That's all I have. Then let's move on to new business, 2025 workers' comp liability and cyber insurance renewal. Mr. Cannon.
Yes, I know your guys' favorite agenda item every year. This is, you guys are just dying for the last meeting in November to do this every year. So you do have our renewal presentation in your packets from Highland. As you guys, or at least those of you who were on the council before, there's really three components of our insurance renewal. It's our liability coverage, it's our cyber, and it's our workers' comp. We do put this service out. Highland is our broker. They are not the insurance provider. So we did 3 years ago do a RFP in which we selected Highland as our broker. When we did select them, they did shop the program. You'll notice in the executive summary, if you had a chance to review that they are recommending the last 3 years we've used Astra, and this year we're also recommending to use Astra. But based on our growth and increasing assets, Highland is recommending that next year that we do reshop that program, and that Travelers, that based on our growth, we're starting to get into where Travelers is going to be more interested and has been interested in our program, but they just weren't competitive with Astra, kind of at the lower rates where we were. So we will reshop some of those. We've actually had continued great renewals on our workers' comp, which we have IPEP, and Travelers actually provides our cyber liability. And so if you guys look at both of those renewals, our cyber renewal is only going up about $560, which is absolutely nothing. So that's incredibly good renewal. Our workers' comp's the same way. It's going up $1,700. So that's a great renewal as well. I know we just talked about some of our workers' comp benefit, and I think one of the priorities of our staff has been to reduce accidents and injuries, and safety is important to us, especially I know Sean does a great job with the police department. Our parks department has implemented a lot of additional safety things too, because we've had some issues with some park employee safety. And so I think we're going to continue to see IPEP kind of stuck with us in some of those bad years and didn't really jack up our rates, even though the performance mod is typically what drives that. And you can see that went up 7%, but they obviously didn't do a 7% renewal. And so the biggest growth in our premium was actually on our property, inland marine, and particularly really our automobile, as we've continued to add staff and additional vehicles that we've done. Our automobile has gone up. We've also had a couple of years where we've struggled with some accidents, and so that has also driven up our auto. And so the majority of the increase in the premium, our 2023-2024 premium was $313,083, and our premium this year is $361,782. It ends up being about a total of about a 16% increase. So you guys will remember we just went through the budget process. We did only budget a 10% increase, and so it is a little bit higher than what we budgeted. The funny thing about insurance, and this is a challenge that we have every year, is we budgeted for insurance for next year. So we would pay our insurance next year in November. So this renewal is actually coming out of this year's budget. And so we're actually paying this year. So even though when we do our budget, we're projecting what it's actually going to look like next year, not what it looks like this year. So it's really odd, and I know it creates some angst on your guys' part about why can't we find a way, but the way our renewal works, there's just no way around this. It's just a reality of the situation, that this is what happens because we can't plan and budget for the year that we're actually doing it. So I'm sure your question is, Ryan, how are we going to pay for this, and what did we budget? We actually budgeted $308,848 in 2024. We have spent a little bit of it because our workers' comp census went up, so we had to pay an adjustment. So as of today, we have $272,000 available for insurance. So I've got to make up about $90,000 to be able to pay that premium. Fortunately, Julie just closed our books for October, and we're about 83% of the way through the year, but we've only spent 75% of our budget in general fund. So we have about a $2 million excess still that we've underspent. Some of that has been employee retention. We had some positions that were unfilled. We had some positions that were vacant for a period of time. And then we have some other areas of underspending as well. So we've got about $2 million left to spend in the next 2 months, which we will not do. And so we do have excess. I can't tell you guys exactly what account lines it's going to come from at this moment. What we'll actually do is we'll pay them from the liability insurance lines. And then when Julie does the reappropriations ordinance, we'll move the funding into that line to basically cancel out the negative. But we still want to track it in the insurance line, so that way we know it was spent on insurance. And so that's how we would adjust it. So I'm confident that we can pay for it. Some of this, our premium is actually split across a bunch of different departments. It's split across the police department, the public works department, MVH, stormwater, general fund, and food and beverage. And we also even have some in our recreation fund, which is our sports department. And so the actual cost is spread across to all those different departments. So again, I know this looks like a significant increase, but actually based on our growing assets, and Highland always does a really nice job of showing the property value increase, our marine increases, and some of those other things. And so obviously that's our increased price as a result of those added assets and those increases in our payrolls and things like that. So again, I'm happy to answer any questions. There were a couple of questions that I think Highland asked. They did offer an increase in our social engineering and telecom fraud to $250,000. Our current coverage is $100,000. I had some discussions with Highland about it's not a great expense. It's only $169. And you guys know that we're commonly phished and we're commonly targeted for some things like that, just being that we're a municipality and a governmental entity. However, in my conversation with Highland, it would be very rare probably for us to have something that exceeded 100,000. I think the issues where we've had before have been kind of payroll issues, or maybe it's a singular check to a vendor, but Julie doesn't cut a ton of checks over 100,000. And if she does, they're probably over 250,000 too. So my recommendation to you guys would be to just continue at our existing coverage. I think they did also suggest if we wanted to consider higher cyber coverage, that we could do that. That's a pretty substantial increase. It's almost a 30% increase to go up. So again, I think our low premium increase is a sign from travelers that they think our practices and the things that we're doing are protecting us from that. Otherwise, I think we'd see a big jump in our insurance. So again, my recommendation would be is we just leave our coverage at what it's at today and not increase it. So I'm happy to answer any questions you guys have, but it is our recommendation that you approve as presented by Highland.
Well, you know my position. It's always the 11th hour with this every year. And again, you've just told us things that I would feel a lot more comfortable in sitting down, looking at it, reviewing it, asking questions offline versus online. And now I'm pretty much to the point, not that I don't, but we have to rely on recommendation of you. I think what you said about Julie and then the check she writes, we use positive pay anyhow, don't we, Julie? So that would catch any type of check fraud or washing checks or whatever it might be. So I'm not overly concerned about that. But you had mentioned we started with $308,838 and we were down to $272. Why would that go down?
So every year they do a workers' comp analysis. So we actually they do a workers' comp. They show up, what is it, January? And they do a payroll audit. And so they have a projected payroll. And then when they come and actually do the payroll audit. And so if it's different than what they expected, then we have to pay the difference. And so we normally get that in like February. The other piece that we expensed was the sports department asked for us to add coverage for our participants. It was needed. And so that was like $15,000. And so we paid for that additional participant coverage as well. And so that's why we've spent some of it. The rest of it, it's all there for this renewal.
So then, and you had indicated that because we had positions that weren't filled, we have excess dollars. I get that, but at some point in time, we have to head that off. When are we going to do that?
I'm not sure what you mean by head off.
Well, every time we're going to have 40 employees and we only have 35, but we've budgeted for 5 more. So we haven't used those salaries. So that's what we're leaning on to get this excess dollars. Well, the next time we do our budget, I would think our budget would be at least $361,782. And that $50,000 payroll difference that you said, we got to add to it or subtract from it when we do our budget. So when it comes to this at the end of the year, we've got the money allocated, not hoping that we can offset it because we didn't hire enough people throughout the year and we have excess cash.
Actually, you can say it.
Yeah, we're actually, so that's what so this is the problem that we're budgeting for something we don't know.
I get that.
And so that's what this year, for what we did in the 2025 budget, I used that number 313,083, and we assumed a 10% increase. So for next year, we budgeted $358,549. So again, that's not enough to cover next year's renewal unless our renewal comes down, but I'm really close. And that's what we're making a guess every year when we do the budget. And I don't know that there's any way around that.
And I'm okay with that point, but then we lost 50 grand from a payroll difference. How do we overcome that piece?
I don't know how we overcome that. I think that's the audit that they do based on
Is
what
that
they
like
do.
an
I don't-
estimated tax bill or something? I mean, when you do your taxes?
No, it is based on, they do an analysis of what we projected then and what our actual payroll was. And they put it into specific roles. So a clerical has a rate, a police officer has a rate. And so they take each of those versus just a sum, and then they actually just audit it. And it spits out that this is what your premium should be versus what we projected it to be.
And Ryan, I know I ask this every year, but why do you say that it's impossible to have them submit what it's going to be?
Because it doesn't, it will, let's just say our renewal was in January. We'd still have the same problem. Because we're in the year after when we budgeted. So there's no way for us to actually know what our renewal will be for the following year because we're always paying the year ahead. And so there's no way to fix it. We could make it earlier so you guys get the premium renewal earlier, but that's still not going to resolve the issue that you're not going to know what to budget because we're always budgeting for a number that we don't know because it's next November's number. And so we're always going to have that issue. It's just not going to matter when our renewal
But we would know what
is.
the increase is, right?
No, because you're not going to know till we won't know till next November what the increase is. So no matter what, it's always going to be next year before we find out. And we're always going to approve our budget this year. And so there's no way around it. It's just, we have to accept that that's what's going to happen. Now we can do a better job of budgeting it. And to Greg's point, and this is, Highland suggested this, if you guys want more involvement in the renewal, that we could create an insurance committee and we could sit down and have quarterly meetings or something like that to go through the insurance. So when you guys get to this point, you have a better understanding of it, if that's what you guys want, versus you're trusting me to do it. Again, that becomes how much involvement do you guys want and how much time do you want to spend looking at insurance?
On page 4, I see that they say that all recommendations from the last dam inspection needs to be completed by next year's inspection, and failure to meet those recommendations will result in exclusion of the dam in its entirety. So do we have that scheduled for inspection?
We do. It's not the inspection. So Highland and I discussed this. We think there's confusion on Astra's part because our dam is classified as a high hazard dam. So we think that they thought that because we're a high hazard dam because we hadn't done the improvements, which isn't the case at all. It's a high hazard dam because of the downstream impact that would be caused by a breach.
Mhm.
And so Highland thinks that a part of the reason they're taking that position is because if you guys have watched the weather recently, there have been breaches of dams and they create flooding in all these areas. That's part of what happened in North Carolina was dams breached and it flooded out all these homes and stuff. That's not the issue with our dam. So we think that Astra misunderstood the issues with our dam. The things that need to be fixed are not structural issues. It is like seal a crack in the wall. Those aren't issues that are going to create a breach of the dam. And again, this is the difference between someone who's dealing with the actual maintenance on a dam and an adjuster who's sitting in an office looking at a dam and trying to think, is this a risk, a liability risk for me? And so that's why they made those comments. We'll address them. The issues that need to be addressed are super minor. They will be fixed. They may actually already be fixed. I don't even know that they're not fixed. So
I would say then that falls upon Highland to talk with the insurer that they're recommending insure us and communicate that on our behalf.
absolutely. And that's a discussion I had with Highland. And they said that was good because, again, Highland doesn't necessarily know. They said they would communicate that information back to Astra.
Either way, we want to make sure whatever recommendations have been addressed so that it's
course.
not eliminated or.
And we always do. And that's what we do, an inspection every 2 years. And we always do whatever that inspection requires.
Okay.
One of them was like, send them pictures of the dam from the downstream side. And again, us not doing that isn't going to create a breach of the dam. But again, we don't want to lose coverage on the dam. So I 100% agree with you, Don.
Ryan, can you talk to me about the social engineering telecom fraud? One, why are they suggesting that it be raised? And then two, what are they specifically defining as a social engineering attack? Social engineering, hands down, is the weakest point of a cybersecurity attack. So what I'm worried about is for them to claim that email phishing, you can absolutely classify that as social engineering, and had that been a breach that went over $100,000, would they then not cover it because you could classify that as a social engineering attack? So that's what I'm trying to get. What are they qualifying as a social engineering attack in this? That they would only cover us up to 100 grand in damages for?
It's the human piece. It's exactly what you talked about. It's phishing. It would be if someone came in and said they were picking up a check and Jessica thought it was DC Construction picking up a check and Jessica gave it to somebody else and somebody else steals the check and cashes it. It's if Julie mails a check and it gets stolen. It's phishing. It could be any of those things. They weren't necessarily recommending that we get higher coverage. So when I explained to him where I felt like our weak points were, I don't believe having higher coverage than 100,000 is necessary. And we do training and we have risk management program and we have internal controls. Like we have really strong internal functions to prevent those social engineering situations from happening. So I think they weren't necessarily recommending more. They're just saying that's an option if you want to have more coverage.
If let me understand this a little better. If that phishing attack comes through, if that phishing attack comes through and there's a check for $99,000 that goes through, they cash that. But say in this situation there are attorney fees that need to take place for something, is that then covered under legal experts? Is that separated from that particular line item, that particular amount of coverage?
Yeah. So I think, are you trying to understand like what's the difference between cyber versus social engineering?
A little bit. I want to make sure it's well defined is what I don't want this to be a situation where, because quite a lot of cybersecurity attacks absolutely come in and it's under social engineering. And I don't want that to be, oh, sorry, we're at your cap in that category. And so we're done. That's why I want to make sure that we are at that right size cap for what they're going to define as a social engineering attack.
Right. I don't know that I'm probably the right person to do that, but what I may ask of Highland is to provide a specific definition of what social engineering is so you can see that.
At least what they
Because
define it, sure.
what you're talking about, I would put into cyber. I wouldn't expect that to be social engineering. I would put that in cyber. And that's how we have dealt with cyber situations in the past, is exactly what you're asking me.
Is that what our carrier actually is going to define it as? And
Right.
It's defined in the policy. I think what we gotta do is ask our agent to get some assurance about that, but also we can show you the language in the policy.
okay.
And because you're right, people could define that term to mean any number of things. And the only thing that's important is how the carrier has defined it in the policy. We'll get that for you.
Thank you.
I think last question that I have that I just thought of is, we've purchased, a lot of sports fields, and with that has come additional equipment and things. Is there coverage on those items as well in this renewal? I didn't see
Yes.
it.
Yeah.
I'm
All of our
flipping through
sports
here.
fields, all of our equipment, everything gets added to our asset lists in our coverage. So yes, all of that stuff has been added.
Okay, 'cause I didn't see it specifically, but I'm flipping through here pretty quickly.
Jason, Bill, any other questions? I'm on board with what Robert was saying, because when you get to the adjuster, that adjuster is going to have a different interpretation of what your interpretation of that definition was. And they're going to, it's like a Ouija board. They're going to move stuff around. So if we can get that clarification. Because we're looking at ways that we can get reimbursed. They're looking at ways not to reimburse us. Any other questions for Mr. Cannon? Somebody like to make a motion then to approve the renewal?
I'll make a motion that we approve the 2025 workers' comp liability and cyber insurance renewal as presented.
Second.
Forgive me, do you need that without adjustments or just as presented as Roger?
We have a motion, we have a second. Roll call, please.
Greg Zuzen,
4.
Robert Pope,
4.
Bill Holland,
4.
Don Loudon,
4.
Jason Puckett.
4.
Next item on the agenda is Resolution 2024-24, authorizing the acquisition of right-of-way for Raceway and County Road 100 North Roundabout. Mr. Cannon.
Yeah, I'm going to do this tonight. This is a project we're hoping to go to construction next year, so we're a little bit behind in terms of getting this right-of-way acquisition started. I did you should have a Excel spreadsheet on your desk that shows how I came up with the recommendation. We typically, I don't want to post those things online because it has property owner names on it and what the values are of their property. So I typically don't post that, but you do have one at your desk that should explain how I got to the number that's in the resolution. But this resolution authorizes the staff to move forward with the acquisition of the right-of-way. We did employ the services of someone to do the appraisals on behalf of the town. And so you do, again, you have that number in front of you. The number that's in the resolution is slightly higher, as I always ask for a little bit of flexibility in order for us to be able to negotiate and get all of those properties acquired. And so that's the additional amount. And so I would ask for authorization if you guys would approve this resolution so that we can begin that right-of-way acquisition process.
Any questions for Mr. Cannon?
Without me hopping on my phone and computer, what percentage did you buffer this? And what
10.
your 10%?
10%. I always do 10%.
Oh,
Did you want to talk about the sources and uses that we got? I pointed out that the numbers didn't balance.
yeah, that's what I'm confused.
Oh, sorry. Don, maybe I misunderstood your question. Were you talking about the sources and uses, or were you talking about the Excel spreadsheet that's in front of you?
The Excel spreadsheet on mine.
Oh, yeah, it should be 10%.
10%.
Okay.
Yeah, Greg, sorry, let me get to the sources and uses really quick. Greg's correct. I had a couple numbers that I didn't necessarily correct in my spreadsheet. So if you guys are looking at the ERTIP, which is the Indianapolis Regional Transportation Improvement Program, the ERTIP is the Metropolitan Planning Organization funding. So my numbers didn't necessarily match across the federal funds, but basically the ERTIP is the federal funds. So I've corrected it now because Greg did notice it, but our federal funds in the ERTIP should actually reflect what's in the spreadsheet to the right, which is the $2,911,530 for construction and the $262,300 for construction observation, for a total of $3,173,830 for the federal funding. And then the difference is the town's responsibility, which is about the $2,009,000 for the total project. Now, some of those costs we've already expensed, and that's, you can see the land ac is projected at $200,000. And so we're right there where, based on the appraisals, we're right where we projected for the budget. Greg also did point out that my design and environmental services number didn't track across the spreadsheet. So
Construction observation one. Oh, you're right.
oh no,
Design,
yeah,
you're
the
right.
309,695 actually should have carried across to the town to be 309, and so I think that does change our number to I think like 2,021,021. I think
26,126.
Yeah, sorry, I do have it here. Yes, our 2,026,126. That's correct. And so our total share of the project's 38.96%.
Any other questions for Mr. Cannon?
Have you had any conversation with any of these property owners yet?
Not yet. We're typically not allowed to due to the acquisition process. Some of them, our engineers had some correspondence because we always try to avoid any issues beforehand. So if we can make design changes as a result of just some general communication with the property owners, but no specific contact regarding the acquisition of the right-of-way yet.
If there are no questions, I need a motion.
I'll make a motion that we approve the right-of-way consideration and authorize up to it and not to exceed $201,465.
We have a motion. Do we have a second? We have a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Bill Holland,
4.
Jason Puckett,
4.
Don Loudon,
For
Robert Pope,
4.
Craig Zuzen,
4. Next item on the agenda is Resolution 2024-25 Fiscal Plan Meyer. Mr. Taylor or Mr. Cannon going to do that?
I'll go ahead and do it. So as you guys are aware, anytime we do an annexation, the law actually requires us to prepare a fiscal plan, which is our policy guide for how we will provide services to that area if the town council eventually annexes it. And so just as a reminder, this Meyer parcel is on County Road 900 East, and it's a very small parcel, so the fiscal study isn't very exciting or anything special. It was prepared by Financial Solutions Group, our consultant, and I'm happy to answer any questions. Otherwise, I think it's pretty straightforward.
Any questions for Mr. Cannon? Somebody like to make a motion regarding the resolution?
I'll make a motion that we approve Resolution 2024-25 for the Meyer fiscal plan as presented.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Bill Holland,
4.
Jason Puckett,
4.
Robert Pope,
4.
Craig Zuzen,
4.
Don Loudon.
For
Next item is Resolution 2024-26 Fiscal Plan Bloom Phase 1.
Yeah, again, same thing, fiscal plan, you guys are aware, we received a petition from the Bloom family, and Lennar is proposing a development on this parcel. It's on Main Street, sorry, I wanted to use County Road, and it's not a county road, I apologize. On Main Street, towards the west end of town, it will be done in 2 phases. It's a little bit of an unusual fiscal plan because just the north part is part of 1 and then section 2, so you'll notice the way I had Financial Solutions Group do is to just pay regard to both sections. And so you'll see some points where it says, as part of phase 2, this is the overall impact, but we specifically still needed to show what's the impact really of just phase 1. So if you see that, it looks a little weird in there that you guys don't typically see that in a fiscal plan. That's why they did it, was to still show the overall impact. And that helps Financial Solutions Group versus creating 2 full, completely different, but then still fulfilled the legal requirements we needed for phasing it. And so, again, I'm happy to answer any questions. Again, this piece is relatively small, but you'll see the majority of it in phase 2. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Cannon? Would somebody like to make a motion?
I'll make a motion that we adopt Resolution 2024-26 Fiscal Plan Bloom Phase 1 as presented.
second.
We have a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Bill Holland,
4.
Jason Puckett,
4.
Craig Zuzen,
4.
Robert Pope,
4.
Don Loudon.
For
Next item is Resolution 2024-27, the 2025 meeting schedule.
Yeah, as shown in the resolution, the town council, for transparency purposes, always adopts a schedule that allows us to post it and advertise it, as well as put it on our website. So anyone in the community who's interested in attending a town council meeting knows when and where we're meeting. And we do this for the whole year. So this is your meeting schedule. I know we've had some strange meeting schedules in the past. This year, I know we did not, but next year we won't either. So we meet the 2nd and 4th Thursday of every month, except for November and December, which is what we're doing this month and next month as well. So meeting schedule is basically the same. And then we've continued to, at the first meeting of the month, to continue to have the work session at 5:30 p.m. So that's your schedule. Happy to answer your questions.
Any questions for Mr. Cannon? Somebody like to make a motion?
I'll make a motion that we accept Resolution 2024-27 with our 2025 meeting schedule as presented.
Second that.
We have a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Bill Holland,
4.
Don Loudon,
For
Robert Pope,
4.
Greg Zuzen,
4.
Jason Puckett,
4.
Next is the final reading of ordinance 2024-54, Silver Springs rezoning. Mr. Lambie.
Thank you, President Zuzen, members of the council. Ordinance 2020, 2024-54 is a proposal to rezone just shy of 50 acres to the R3 mixed residential district. Property is located on the west side of County Road 900 North, approximately a fifth of a mile north of County Road 200 North. The proposal would allow for a mix of single-family homes and townhouses. As proposed, 74 single-family homes would be constructed and 101 attached townhouse units. The single-family portion would come in at right around 2.5 units per acre. The townhouses would be closer to 5 units per acre for an overall density of 3.5 units per acre. The criteria that you have to consider in zoning map amendment, there are 5 of those in state statute, and I'm going to go through those quickly. First is the comp plan. The comp plan actually recommends retail development for this property on the future land use cluster map from the 2017 comp plan. And staff does support the idea that there should be retail development in this area to serve the surrounding neighborhoods. However, there is another proposal that is pending with the Plan Commission, which would rezone almost 30 acres immediately to the south of this property at the hard corner of 200 and 900 to C2 to allow for a grocery store and other retail development there. And it's staff's opinion that that amount of retail development would be sufficient to serve the surrounding neighborhoods, and that this property that's before you today would be suitable for residential development, and thus that a deviation from that specific land use recommendation would be appropriate. The second criterion being the current conditions and character of the structures and uses in the district. There is a single family neighborhood immediately to the west across the Centennial Trail, and there is planned residential development immediately to the north, which is in the town of Brownsburg. And there's a stub street from the neighborhood to the west, as well as one planned from the Brownsburg development to the north, which make this particular portion of property suitable for residential development. The third criterion being the most desirable use for which the land is adapted. Again, the stub streets existing and proposed to the west and north make residential development appropriate here, and also the fact that those abutting residential developments that are at comparable densities, we think make residential development here desirable. And finally, the fact that there is industrial development across 900 to the east, and then exclusively a single-family subdivision to the west, having a mix of single-family and townhouses at this site would be an appropriate transition between the industrial and the exclusively single-family. The fourth criterion being conservation of property values throughout the jurisdiction. We don't foresee that a mix of single-family and townhouse development would have any substantial adverse effect on surrounding property values. And the fifth criterion being responsible development and growth. We do believe taking this longstanding agricultural property and developing it residentially in a manner that's consistent with the development around it, at least to the west and to the north, that are both residential. We think that would be responsible development and growth. So in viewing the criteria, which, unlike some situations, I know you guys don't deal directly with variances where we have findings that all have to be met individually. The criteria for rezoning property is meant to be looked at holistically. So in totality, we do believe that the required criteria have been met by this proposal. The zoning map amendment petition, ZA 24-05, was passed by the Plan Commission on October 28th by a vote of 6-0. And it was subject to 5 commitments that were recommended by staff. There was discussion at that hearing about potentially adding a 6th commitment, which would limit the density of the single-family portion of the development to a maximum of 3 units per acre, which would match the maximum in the R2 district, which is what the subdivision to the west is zoned. We did have a little discussion at the hearing and looked at the numbers, and as I mentioned earlier, calculated that the single-family area would come in at about 2.5 units per acre. It wasn't, I don't think, 100% clear if the intention of the Plan Commission was to actually add that 3-unit maximum as a commitment. But we have checked with the petitioner, and they have indicated that they're agreeable to adding that commitment. So we have put that 6th commitment into the proposed ordinance. So for all those reasons, staff continues to recommend approval of this zoning map amendment, and I'd be happy to answer any questions. Also, the petitioner is available if you have questions or would like to hear from them as well.
Any questions for Mr. Lambie?
I
Mr. Holland?
have a couple. So you had, in your presentation, you had indicated that there was another parcel that was at 200 and 900 that could or is possibly going to be rezoned as well. Is that correct?
Yes, that's currently pending before the Plan Commission. It's a proposal to rezone almost 30 acres to C2.
When are you going to see that?
Monday.
Okay. Not asking you to break any laws or anything, but do you see any issues there?
It was continued. They were going to look at a couple items. One of them was to move the major one was to move the fueling station to 900 from 200.
Thank you.
Thank you for running through the criteria with us. I think that I'm in an opinion that we do meet the 5 criteria, in my opinion, on that. So thank you for going through that with us.
You're welcome.
You mentioned a 6th. It's not reflected on our copy of the ordinance. So maybe this is a question for Dan. For us to include that, we're going to need to put that on the record tonight as a part of any motion.
Right, you have the right, if the petitioner has offered to make that commitment, I would, if you want that as a condition, I would accept it and make it part of your motion. Then the ordinance can be revised to reflect that. And I agree with Paul. I don't know why we wouldn't want that limitation. It was discussed, just not exactly agreed to at the meeting. So
I believe Ms. Loker has a copy of the ordinance that has the 6th commitment, but I'm happy to read into the record from my copy. That would read, subject to the single-family detached portion of the development not exceeding a density of 3 units per acre.
I like that better than what I wrote down. So
That was my question. Well, I wanted clarification. Is it 3 units or is it 2.5 units? Because I think part of the other confusing part was we thought this was R2 and it was actually R1 through our discussions or not. We found that the zoning maps were incorrect.
I don't think that was this parcel. I think that was another parcel.
There's another one? Okay.
I think that was a different parcel. So I think the discussion at the Plan Commission was that the Plan Commission wanted it to not exceed, the single-family homes portion not to exceed the R2 standard, which is 3 units per acre.
Okay.
The developer agreed to, or we may ask them to come up and agree to that. The density they were showing on their plan was 2.5 units per acre. So they were willing to meet that because they were already below that threshold.
So that's where the 2.5, so that's
where the 2.5
number I
came
would
from.
rather put in than 3.
Well, if that's the number you want, you may clarify, because I don't think that's what you guys said at the Plan Commission. You guys said that you wanted the single-family home portion to not exceed R2 standards, which is the 3 units per acres. So again, just, I'm not saying that's not okay, just clarify that 2.5 or 3 is the right number.
Any more questions from Mr. Lambie?
I have one more.
Mr. Holland?
Just to clarify that property that I was asking about, the one that Craig is going to, here this week or next week. It's not associated with these developers at all, is it?
As far as I'm aware, it would be developed by, it would be developed by a different entity. I'm not sure about the current ownership.
Thank you.
If the petitioner would like to come forward at this time.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the council. My name is Brian Toohey. I represent Lennar. Here with me is Jason Challen. Thank you for hearing our case. I can go through the full petition, or should we just focus in on the issues that were brought up this evening?
I think if we can just focus on the density of 2.5 versus 3.
So the way that calculation was made, and since I didn't want to trust my IU math to do it, I actually asked our engineer this evening to do that. And the way that calculation was made is that the residential area of the single family residential area of the community is about 30.6 acres. And there are 74 lots shown on their plan. That comes out to 2.4. The thing that makes me a little uneasy about saying 2.5 is if that 30.6 acres turns into 29.7, I don't know what that math is, but we're going to be pretty close. The way this came up at the Planning Commission was, would the petitioner agree that the density would not exceed the R2 standard, and that was the 3 homes per acre. And so, and we said we would agree to that because we knew of this, about this calculation. The way I saw the ordinance was changed tonight, I immediately told Mr. Lambie that was fine. I told Linda Albrand today that was fine. We would make that a commitment. We also reached an agreement on amount of a contribution for the infrastructure. Linda got that number and we said we agreed to that. So I'm up for whatever the council suggests. I'm just a little uneasy at 2.5 when I'm pretty close to it right now.
We're giving you some wiggle room. We went from 240 to 249. We only said 250. I mean, we can round it, we can go to 260 if you want. I'd rather be 260 than 3.
2.6?
Yeah.
Thank you. That would,
Anybody else have any concerns or comments?
yeah. I just did that without checking my client. That's dangerous work. Yeah, I think we'll be comfortable there in case there's a decimal point off or two. So.
Any other questions for the petitioner? Thank you.
And we are not the developers of the site south of us. We understand that's I think it's a Meyer, and we're not involved in that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Greg, can I clarify real quick? You're changing this density to 2.6?
2.6, yes.
On the alternate, I had 3. So 2 point. I'll make that correction.
And again, this might be a Dan question, but whoever makes the motion, I think we would have to make that clarification in the motion tonight anyway.
Yes. If there are no further questions, is somebody prepared to make the motion?
I'll make a motion that we adopt ordinance 2024-54 Silver Springs rezoning to include the 5 commitments agreed to by the Plan Commission, and also including the 6th commitment, which would include the limited density of not more than 2.6 units per acre in the single family portion of the development.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Bill Holland,
4.
Jason Puckett,
4.
Robert Pope,
4.
Greg Zuzen,
4.
Don Loudon.
4.
Next item on the agenda is the final reading ordinance 2024-32, the Carnoustie annexation. Mr. Cannon?
Yeah, we've been long at this. As you guys are aware, the Carnoustie annexation is in the vicinity of County Road 525 East and 100 South. I have a fancy map back here, but I know you guys have an exhibit in yours as well. We've done our public hearing. We've done all our steps in our process. We've done our informational meetings. And so this is the town council's final step in the process. The staff still has a substantial amount of work to do, but this is for you guys to do the final adoption. Once you do the final adoption, if you do approve it tonight, we will send out notices to all the property owners, and there's a 90-day remonstrance period. And at the end of that, then the annexation actually becomes effective. So it does become effective at the end of February, or really around March 1st, if the town council does approve it tonight. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Cannon?
No, just congratulations from me, because this, like Ryan said, has been a long and tedious process. And, this particular one, annexation, was one where they came to us and realized the benefit of annexing into the town of Avon. And so that was unique in our typical unique to our typical annexation process. So with that, I'd like to make a motion to accept ordinance 2024-32 to annex the Carnoustie annexation into the town of Avon.
I will second that.
We have a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Bill Holland,
4.
Jason Puckett,
4.
Greg Zuzen,
4.
Robert Pope,
4.
Don Loudon.
4.
The next item on the agenda is final reading of ordinance 2024-33, east of County Road 400 East.
Yeah, same thing. Again, another voluntary annexation that we've been working really hard on, east of County Road 400 East and north of County Road 100 South, over by where the school is building the new middle school west. Again, we've been working on it for a couple of years, so we've done our public hearings, we've done all of our steps. So this is the final step. Same situation. Once you guys approve it, we do need to send remonstrance letters to all the property owners, and there will be a 90-day remonstrance period as well. And so it will become effective ultimately. If there's not enough remonstrance, then around the same time, around March 1st. Happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Cannon?
Not a question, but kind of same vein of what Dawn said. This was a tough one. This wasn't ideal. I know there are 3 of us that have talked to neighbors within that area. But don't let perfect get in the way of great. And so I think this is what we've got. And it's an incredible strategic annexation for the community at large. So unless there's anyone, I'd like to make a motion that we adopt ordinance 2024-33 east of County Road 400 East annexation as presented.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Greg Zuzen,
4.
Bill Holland,
4.
Jason Puckett,
4.
Don Loudon,
4.
Robert Pope.
4.
Next item is the final reading of ordinance 2024-49, creating a 2024 food and beverage bond fund.
Yes, this ordinance creates a new fund that will hold the proceeds from your recent food and beverage bonds. It merely creates the fund and creates a standalone fund that will be it's a non-reverting fund that will hold those proceeds and allow you to track the expenditures on the use of these funds consistent with the bond. This is second reading.
Any questions for Mr. Taylor? Julie, we've already received the proceeds from that bond.
Yep.
Is somebody prepared to make a motion?
I'll make a motion that we adopt ordinance 2024-49, creating the 2024 general obligation bond fund as presented.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Roll call, please.
Bill Holland,
4.
Robert Pope,
4.
Jason Puckett,
4.
Greg Zuzen,
4.
Don Loudon.
4.
Next item on the agenda is the final reading of ordinance 2024-50, creating the 2024 General Obligation Bond Fund.
This ordinance creates a special fund for the proceeds of the general obligation bond. As you recall, I think just today, received the funds on this bond, $2 million for public works projects. This allows us to, as our clerk treasurer, to capture those bond proceeds in one fund, let them stand there where we can track them. And so it creates a non-reverting fund for that sole purpose. Second reading also.
Any questions for Mr. Taylor? Somebody like to make a motion, please?
Make a motion that we adopt ordinance 2024-50, creating a 2024 general obligation bond fund as presented.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
John Loudon,
4.
Bill Holland,
4.
Jason Puckett,
4.
Robert Pope,
4.
Greg Zuzen.
4.
Before you go on, I want to clarify. I read the title here verbatim. At least the ordinance number was correct. But my initial motion on ordinance 2024-49 was for the food and beverage bond. Again, the ordinance number was correct. So Dan, I'm looking at you. Are we kosher on my motion for the food and beverage bond, not the general obligation bond?
Different.
Nope.
That's what you meant, right?
I meant the food and beverage, but was reading the food and beverage bond, excuse me, but I was reading verbatim the headline. It's just incorrect on my agenda. That's
The
all.
heading's wrong on the
Heading, yes.
agenda, but the ordinance is correct.
Yes,
Yeah.
correct. Thanks.
Next item is the introduction of the 2024-51, 2024 additional appropriations. Julie, Ryan?
I'll introduce it. If you guys have questions, Julie's obviously knowledgeable of this as well. This is also, police department helps do this as well. Additional appropriations is basically authorizing the additional expenditure of money you didn't necessarily plan in the budget. So these items that are on your agenda, just as the ordinance mentions, are items where we either received revenue this year that we didn't anticipate, or in some cases, it may be expenditures we overexpended and we need to do additional appropriations. In this case, on what's on your agenda, none of these are actual. These are all revenue things, other than the first one, which is every year you guys do a resolution to transfer any unexpended funds to the rainy day fund. And so we do that, but that looks like an expenditure in our 2024 budget. And so we need you to do additional appropriation basically out of that fund to just basically cancel out that. Otherwise, that looks like a negative $150,000 expenditure, which it really isn't. The other ones are all revenue receipts. So the edit expenditures are Make My Move. That was our grant that we received from the IEDC for Make My Move. We also had a HSA mispost where we actually just posted it to the wrong fund, and it had to be fixed when Julie was closing the books. That was $63,000, so we're just correcting that mispost. The big number, the capital outlay one in MVH, the $1,161,685.10 is our community crossings grant. And so in order for Steve to pay the contractor for doing that work, we actually have to appropriate those funds. We have expended some of those funds. So if you look at Julie's reports, you're going to wonder, why is there a $600,000 negative there? And that's because you haven't appropriated this expenditure there. But once you do that, then it's going to look like there's $600,000 there to spend. And then the last one, Deputy Chief Nugent asked for authorization to buy gym equipment from the Lisi Fund. And so that's the $29,612 is the additional appropriation to pay for that expenditure that you guys authorized. Again, this is just an introduction, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Cannon? And for the minutes, we'll show that we have introduced ordinance 2024-51, the 2024 additional appropriations. Next item is the public hearing and introduction of the 2024-52 Meyer annexation. Mr. Cannon, Mr. Taylor.
Yeah, I'll just do a brief intro and then you can open up the public hearing. We just talked about the fiscal plan for the Meyer property. So this was the development Mr. Holland was asking about earlier. They are acquiring a property that's not in town. It's about an acre, and it would bring it into town and would be part of their larger development. Again, you guys have to open up the public hearing, and then other than that, you're just introducing the ordinance and no actions required tonight.
This is just that house that was carved out initially.
That's correct.
Thank you. At 8:06, we will open the public hearing then for the 2024-52 Meyer annexation. If you would, please come forward, state your name and address, and limit your comments to 3 minutes. Public hearing is open. With nobody coming forward, then we'll close the public hearing portion of this. And for the minutes, then we'll show we have introduced the 2024-52 Meyer annexation. Next item then is a public hearing and introduction of the 2024-53 Bloom annexation phase 1.
Yeah, same thing earlier. The town council approved the fiscal plan for this portion of the property. And so again, you're just doing your public hearing and introducing the ordinance.
Then at 8:07, we'll open the public hearing for 2024-53, the Bloom annexation phase 1. If you would, please come forward, state your name, address, and limit your comments to 3 minutes. With nobody coming forward, then we'll close that portion of the public hearing. And for the minutes, we'll show that we have introduced the 2024-53 Bloom annexation phase 1. Next item on the agenda then is legal counsel comment. Mr. Taylor.
Just would report to the town council, we have been spending a lot of time with your appointed officials and staff, working on the 3 bonds that you have coming through, the food and beverage, the general obligation, and the Basari Eastern Gray bonds. We appreciate all your fine staff's support with that. And some of your appointed officials have made multiple trips to the town hall to sign documents, and some of you have also. And then we were able last week to spend a couple hours with your department heads and key staff leaders on human resources training. And that was again, we hope useful, productive time for them to kind of sharpen up and sharpen our pencils and do things exactly the right way as we enter the next year. Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is the second of 2 public comment opportunities. The public may comment on items on the agenda that are not a public hearing or on a specific matter within the council's jurisdiction. Please come forward, state your name and address, and limit your comments to 3 minutes. With nobody coming forward, then we'll move on to the next item on our agenda, which is council comment. Any council members have anything?
Everyone have a happy and safe Thanksgiving.
Council calendar, Mr. Cannon.
Yeah, if I could really quickly, I'd like to give a shout out to some of my staff. I know, thank you, Dawn and Robert, for your comments on the annexations. I know I talk about this a lot, that what the town does is like a triangle, and you guys just see the little itty bitty tip of that. And so we used to have an annexation team of 4 people, and it's down to 2. And so Suzanne has to do an incredible amount of work, and I know you guys don't necessarily see that. It's really easy for you guys to pass an ordinance, but Suzanne and I will be, and the rest of the staff will be packing hundreds of letters to go out next week. So thank you to Suzanne for all her hard work and helping do that, as well as just a shout out to the rest of my staff. And I don't know if you guys know it or not, but Sean Stoops' birthday is today, and he gave up going out to his birthday dinner to be here. So happy birthday, Sean. Thank you for being here. I know it wasn't thrilling, but thanks for being here. Also, just a reminder, executive session on December 5th, 4 p.m., 5 p.m., 6 p.m., and then you have your regular meeting at 7 p.m.
Thank you. Well, before we adjourn, should we stand and sing happy birthday?
I vote for after we adjourn.
Okay. Meeting adjourned. Thank you.